She thought she was just doing her job. One command, one slap, one pair of handcuffs. But when the man she arrested turned around and revealed he was her boss, the new deputy commissioner, her entire world came crashing down. This isn't just a story of misconduct. It's a story of what happens when you confront the mirror and choose to change everything. The morning sun blazed down harder than usual. It bounced off the pavement and gleamed through the patrol car windshield, making Officer Wilson squint. She had already handled 3 emergency calls before noon. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes, carved by countless sleepless nights. Her radio crackled, a voice from dispatch, breaking the stale silence. Reported altercation at Quick Stop on 5th Street. Wilson sighed, her fingers tightening on the steering wheel. Just what I needed today, she muttered. She adjusted the strap on her belt, the one that held her badge. But today that badge didn't feel like a symbol of duty. It felt like a stone pressing into her chest. A weight not of metal, but of exhaustion pressure, and something deeper she couldn't yet name. As her cruiser turned the corner, she spotted a small crowd gathered outside the store. Through the front glass, she could see movement, agitated voices, raised hands. She stepped out, every muscle in her body tense. Police. Everyone stay where you are, she called, forcing her way through. The summer heat pressed down, making her short temper even shorter. What she didn't know was the next few minutes would change her life forever. Inside the store, the air was heavy. A young clerk stood frozen behind the counter, fear written all over his face. Nearby, 2 teenagers lingered anxiously, eyes darting back and forth. But the figure that drew Wilson's attention was the man standing calmly between them all. Tall, black, dressed in a dark tailored suit that looked more fitting in a boardroom than a convenience store. He didn't shout or gesture wildly. He simply stood with his hands slightly raised, his voice calm and steady. Let's all take a breath. We can sort this out without anyone getting in trouble. When he turned to see her, relief flickered across his face. Officer, thank goodness you're here. These boys accidentally step away from the counter. Wilson snapped, cutting him off. Her hand instinctively drifted toward her utility belt. The man raised his eyebrows slightly. Officer, I'm just trying to defuse the situation. They didn't mean I said step back. Her tone sharpened. Something about his calm confidence rubbed her the wrong way. Who was he to take control before she even arrived? She didn't care who he was. All that mattered now was reminding everyone who was in charge. The man's voice remained calm, unshaken. Ma'am, if you could just listen for a moment. But to Wilson, his composure felt like defiance. Her authority was being challenged, and something in her cracked. Without warning, she grabbed his arm, spun him around, and shoved him against the store's wall. The music playing overhead kept going, a haunting backdrop to the sudden stillness that followed. Hands behind your back, she ordered, breath short. This is completely unnecessary, the man said, his voice taut with frustration. I was helping resolve the situation. The young clerk spoke up hesitantly. Officer, he really was helping. The teens knocked over a display, and I'll handle this, Wilson snapped, cutting him off. She tightened her grip. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting, he replied through clenched teeth. But you're making a serious mistake. Then he turned his head, slightly locking eyes with her, calm, unafraid. And in that moment, something inside her exploded. She struck him hard across the shoulder. A sharp crack echoed through the store. That's assault, the man said quietly, and it's on camera. Wilson froze, realizing too late. She had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Her ears rang, her hands trembled. She could feel every eye in the store on her, and worse, the silent blinking light of the security camera above. A chorus of smartphones had already been raised by bystanders. But Wilson pressed forward, cursing the flush of heat in her face. She clicked the handcuffs on with cold precision, reciting his rights like a robot. The man didn't resist. He walked calmly toward the patrol car, even with his hands bound behind his back. As they reached the door, he spoke, his voice quiet but deliberate. Badge number 8541, correct. She stiffened. My name is Lieutenant Thomas Richardson, he continued. I started yesterday as deputy commissioner of your department. Wilson's steps faltered. Her heart stopped. No, it couldn't be. But the murmurs in the crowd confirmed it. People gasped, whispered, recorded. If you don't believe me, he added softly, call Chief Bennett. He'll confirm it. Her hand shook as she reached for her radio. The realization hit her like a landslide. She hadn't just manhandled a civilian. She had assaulted her superior officer. And now, the weight of every decision she made was about to come crashing down. The drive back to the station felt like a funeral procession. Wilson kept her eyes on the road, but she could feel Richardson's presence in the back seat, silent, composed, watching. Their eyes met once in the rearview mirror. She quickly looked away, cheeks burning with something between fury and shame. When they walked through the precinct doors, the shift in energy was instant. Officers glanced up. Some stood. One even dropped his coffee. "What the hell is going on?" asked Officer Chen, a 20-year veteran. Wilson didn't answer. She simply kept walking, gripping Richardson's arm as if protocol would save her. "Disturbance at Quick Stop," she muttered. He was interfering. A voice cut through the noise. "Good morning, Lieutenant Richardson." Chief Bennett emerged from his office, mug in hand, and stopped mid-step. His face went pale. The room went silent. "Would someone please explain?" The chief said slowly, "Why are new deputy commissioners in handcuffs?" Wilson felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was the beginning of a reckoning. A heavy silence fell across the room. Chief Bennett stared at the scene before him, Richardson handcuffed and composed. Wilson flushed and trembling. His voice was calm but laced with steel. "Officer Wilson, uncuff him. Now." She hesitated, her fingers fumbling with the keys. The clicking sound of the cuffs unlocking echoed like a verdict. Richardson didn't flinch. He simply rubbed his wrist and nodded. "Thank you." But to Wilson, it felt like the final chime of a bell she hadn't heard ringing until now. The chief gestured sharply. "My office, both of you." Inside, the blinds were drawn. The door clicked shut. The air was thick with disappointment. "I want to speak with Officer Wilson alone," Richardson said. Chief Bennett raised a brow, but nodded. "I'll be right outside." And then the silence returned. But this time it wasn't procedural, it was personal. Wilson stood stiff, barely able to meet Richardson's eyes. The man she had just wrongfully arrested. The man who with quiet grace had endured her failure. And now, he had chosen to confront her not with rage, but with the hardest thing of all, truth. "Do you know why I didn't tell you who I was right away?" Richardson asked, his voice calm. Not cold, just still. Wilson shook her head, her mouth dry. "Because it shouldn't have mattered," he said, folding his hands on the desk. "Whether I was a janitor or your superior, I deserve to be treated with respect. The way you treated me was wrong, not because of my rank, but because I'm human." His words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Wilson's throat tightened. I misread the situation. He looked at her, unblinking. "Did you?" She wanted to nod, wanted to cling to that explanation. But even she could feel the thinness of it now. The truth had a way of making excuses sound hollow. "Or did you see a black man standing in a place of tension and decide he was the threat?" The question landed like a stone in her stomach. She couldn't answer. Not because she didn't have one, but because deep down she feared she did. And it was that silence that accused her more than any word ever could. Richardson stood slowly, walked to the window, then turned back toward her. "Do you understand what this means for you? What you've put this department through? What you've put yourself through?" Wilson nodded barely. Her eyes brimmed but didn't fall. "Not yet. Your badge and weapon," he said gently but with finality. The words hit harder than she'd expected. She reached for her belt, her fingers trembling as she unclipped her badge. It wasn't just metal. It was years of pride, of identity, of belonging. Next came her gun, heavier now than it had ever been. She placed them both in his open palm. "You're on administrative leave, effective immediately," Richardson said, "pending full investigation, and I'll need your written statement today." Wilson nodded, too numb to speak. As she turned to leave, Richardson's voice followed, low but unmistakable. "We're not done." She didn't respond. She couldn't, because behind that door, behind the weight of protocol and punishment, she felt something even heavier, the shame of having betrayed not just her badge, but herself. That night, Wilson lay in her apartment, fully dressed, unmoving. The room was dark except for the cold glow of her laptop screen. On it, the video of her arrest played over and over, her own voice harsh and loud, her own face tense and angry. Richardson's calm words, the slap, the silence, the moment everything shattered. She had watched it dozens of times, and each time it cut deeper. Her phone buzzed endlessly, news alerts, voicemails from reporters, texts from colleagues who no longer knew what to say. She didn't answer any of them. Her brother had called earlier. A single sentence, "What were you thinking?" Or her only reply, "I wasn't." She stared at the ceiling for hours, haunted not just by the video, but by everything it revealed. 28 years old, 8 years in the force. And now, maybe over. She glanced toward the shelf where her academy photo sat beaming in uniform, full of certainty. That version of her seemed like a stranger now. And somewhere deep inside, she whispered the question she had tried to bury. Have I been wrong all along? Before dawn, she sat at her kitchen table, a blank email open on her screen. The cursor blinked, waiting like a heartbeat. She had written and deleted 5 drafts already. None felt right. Finally, she typed, "Lieutenant Richardson, I was wrong. I'm sorry. If you're willing, I'd like to talk." She hovered for a long time before pressing send. The message left her outbox like a weight lifting or a cliff edge beneath her feet. She didn't expect a reply, didn't think she deserved one. But for the first time in days, she felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not relief, just air. A single breath that didn't carry the taste of guilt. Outside, the city stirred under gray morning skies. Inside, Officer Wilson wasn't sure who she was anymore. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to find out. Wilson sat at her desk, the only light in the room coming from her laptop screen. Her hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. She typed, deleted, typed again, deleted once more. 3 drafts in and none of them felt right. Eventually she settled on just a few simple lines. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. If you're willing, I'd like to talk." The words sat there stark against the dark screen. She hesitated, then hit send. The quiet ding of the email leaving her outbox felt louder than anything she'd heard all night. She didn't expect a reply. Maybe she didn't even deserve one. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she took a deep breath and it didn't burn. Rain had started to fall outside. Soft, steady, a whisper against the glass. Wilson sat back, arms folded, staring at nothing. For days she had run from the moment, from the consequences, from herself. But now, with 3 quiet sentences in a trembling hand, she had taken the first honest step back towards something that might one day be called redemption. The next morning, Wilson arrived at the community center 15 minutes early. No badge, no gun, just herself dressed in jeans, a plain blouse, and uncertainty wrapped around every breath. The meeting room wasn't a courtroom or an interrogation space, just a round table beneath wide windows, bathed in soft morning light. And sitting across it was him. Lieutenant Richardson stood when she entered, holding 2 paper cups. "Coffee," he said gently. "Black Dr. Powell mentioned it is how you take it." Wilson took the cup with both hands as if it might anchor her. "Thank you," she whispered. It felt strange the man she had handcuffed was bringing her coffee. They sat in silence for a moment. Not cold, not hostile, just full. "I almost didn't come," she admitted quietly. "I almost didn't respond," he replied. "But you did," she said. "So did you." There was no script for this, no checklist, just 2 people sitting face to face, no uniforms, no ranks, one learning to own her wrongs, the other brave enough to give space to that attempt. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with forgiveness. Sometimes it starts with listening. "Did you know," Richardson began softly, eyes gazing out the window. "When I was 9 years old, a police officer grabbed me outside a convenience store." Wilson looked up, startled. "I had just bought an ice cream cone. I fit a description," they said. His voice didn't shake, but it didn't need to. The pain sat there, steady and alive behind every word. That officer probably doesn't remember. It was just another stop to him. But to me, it was the first time I realized someone could see me as a threat without knowing anything about me. Wilson felt something unravel in her chest, something quiet and shameful. "I told myself I wasn't that kind of cop," she said, barely audible, "that I treated people fairly." But that night, Richardson replied, "You didn't." She nodded slowly. The words stung because they were true. "You're not the first to make a mistake," he said. "But not everyone has the courage to own it." Wilson blinked fast, willing the tears to stay in. She wasn't sure if they were tears of regret or relief. Maybe both. Because in that moment, she understood what you break, you must face. And what you face, you just might begin to heal. Richardson reached into his bag and placed an envelope on the table. His tone was calm but weighty. "There are 2 paths inside this." Wilson opened it. The paper inside outlined 2 options. Option 1, resign, a neutral reference. Walk away quietly. Option 2, 6 months of unpaid rehabilitation therapy, community work, listening circles, and training. No guarantees, just a chance to earn back trust. She looked up. Why? Why would you give me a choice at all after what I did to you? Richardson studied her face for a moment, then said, because this was never about me. It's about whether we believe in change, real change. And that doesn't happen through punishment alone. His voice lowered. It happens when someone is brave enough to ask why they did what they did, and honest enough to face the answer. Wilson stared at the paper. Her hands shook not from fear, but from the weight of being offered something so rare, not escape, not erasure, but transformation. And in a world so quick to condemn, that kind of grace felt like something holy. On the first day of the program, Wilson entered the community room with a knot in her stomach. She wasn't in uniform, wasn't carrying authority. No one saluted her. No one even looked at her kindly. Around her sat people she once might have avoided, victims of police overreach, activists, mothers of arrested teens. No ranks, no titles, just voices and stories that ached. The facilitator handed everyone a worksheet, list the calls you've responded to, and how you truly felt in each moment. Wilson stared at her page. Some cases she couldn't remember. Others made her flinch. She circled the word disconnected again and again until the ink blurred from her grip. After class, while washing cups in the back room, an older woman entered. She paused when she saw Wilson. "You're the one who handcuffed him, aren't you?" she asked. Wilson nodded. The woman didn't speak again. She simply picked up a towel and began drying the cups beside her, quietly, steadily. That small gesture, unspoken, undeserved, settled deep in Wilson's chest. Forgiveness didn't always come in words. Sometimes it came in shared silence, in a hand that stayed. 3 weeks into the program, Wilson found herself at the very place where her downfall had begun, the convenience store on 5th Street. Only now she wasn't there in uniform. She was there as a volunteer, stocking shelves, cleaning sticky floors, listening, learning. Mr. Patel, the store owner, didn't say much. His eyes, however, said everything, still cautious, still watching, measuring her with every quiet movement. One of the boys from that day, "My nephew," he said one afternoon. "He'll be back to work next week." Wilson paused mid-shelving. "If it's all right, I'd like to apologize to him. In person." Mr. Patel didn't answer right away. He simply studied her. Then after a long breath, he said, "You're not who you were that day. But trust takes time." She nodded. She knew trust couldn't be reclaimed with words alone. It had to be rebuilt, one slow, humble action at a time. And here, in the very place she'd lost it, she was starting again. Not to erase what happened, but to face it. And that kind of courage didn't come with a badge. It came with staying. The store bell jingled. Wilson looked up. A teenager stepped inside, tall, lean, shoulders hunched in hesitance. She recognized him instantly, Darnell. One of the boys from that day. He froze when he saw her, snack in hand, feet glued to the floor. "It's okay, Darnell," Mr. Patel called from behind the counter. "She's just helping today." The boy walked forward, cautious. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just watched her, not with hate, not even with fear, but with memory, the kind that lingers. Wilson kept stocking shelves, careful not to interrupt his path. She didn't force an apology, didn't try to justify. She just gave him space. Because sometimes respect doesn't start with an explanation. It starts with silence. After he left, Mr. Patel said, "He comes in every day now, but it took weeks before he stepped foot in here again." Wilson felt that truth settle like a stone in her chest. Her actions hadn't just affected her career. They had left ripples in a young boy's life. She had once thought only big mistakes mattered. Now she knew even a single moment could leave a scar someone carried for years. The community room was dim chairs arranged in a circle, nothing fancy, no podium, no spotlight, just people, real people sitting in raw truth. Wilson sat among them for her 8th listening session. A gray-haired woman spoke first, her voice quivering. "My grandson walks home from basketball practice. He's been stopped 3 times. For nothing." No one interrupted. No one explained it away. That wasn't the point. Wilson listened, really listened to stories that mirrored her own actions. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She just absorbed. When it was her turn, she didn't clear her throat or try to impress. She simply said, "Thank you for sharing something you didn't have to. I'm here to listen, not to defend. And I'm grateful you let me." It wasn't eloquent. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And in some of the eyes around that circle, not all, but something softened. Just a little. Forgiveness wasn't owed, but humanity that could still be offered. And Wilson was finally learning how to accept it not as a gift, but as a step. That night, Wilson sat alone in a small park near her apartment. Wind stirred the leaves. A patrol car rolled slowly past in the distance, headlights cutting across the dark. She watched it pass and felt a strange ache in her chest, a blend of longing and regret. She missed it, the rhythm, the structure, the feeling of walking into a room and knowing her role. She missed the certainty, the illusion of control, but then she thought of Richardson's face against the wall, of Darnell's eyes in the store, of the grandmother in the listening circle trying not to cry, and the ache shifted, became something else, not guilt, not shame, just knowing. She whispered aloud to no one, "Will I ever wear the uniform again?" But the wind offered no answer. And somewhere inside, another voice gently reminded her, "That's not the right question. The question is, should I?" Because change isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about choosing who you'll be next. Back home, Wilson opened her laptop, not to scroll news, not to check emails, but to write. She'd been drafting it for weeks, a training module for officers built from everything she wished she'd known before that day. She called it Seeing the Unseen, Recognizing Bias in the Moment. Each slide was a mirror, real footage, real questions, real pain. She poured into it the honesty she once feared, the discomfort she once avoided. A notification popped up. "You're on the panel for tomorrow's community forum. Don't forget." Dr. Powell Wilson stared at the screen for a long moment, then glanced toward her closet. Her old uniform hung there dry cleaned, wrapped in plastic, untouched. For the first time, the sight didn't break her. Because maybe her role had changed. Maybe her purpose was evolving. Maybe the most important work she'd ever do wouldn't come from behind a badge, but from beside the people she once failed to see. The next morning, Wilson arrived early at the community center, arms full of folded chairs and stacks of training pamphlets. The forum hadn't started yet, but people were already gathering, city officials, officers, neighbors, and voices from every corner of the city. She wasn't there in uniform. She wasn't there to defend herself. She was there to tell the truth. Lieutenant Richardson saw her from across the room and gave a small nod. "Everyone," he said to the assembled group, "Officer Wilson has something important to share today, not just about herself, but about where we go from here." When Wilson stepped forward, the room quieted. She took a breath, not the rehearsed kind, but the trembling kind. "6 months ago, I made a terrible mistake," she said. "But that mistake opened a door I never thought I'd walk through, the door to accountability, not just in policy, but in humanity." People leaned forward. No shouting, no applause, just silence, the kind that listens. Because sometimes the most powerful story is one that starts with, "I was wrong, but I'm learning." After the forum, the department's review board gathered in a back room. Chief Bennett looked down at the documents: Wilson's completed rehabilitation checklist, community letters, testimony from Dr. Powell and Lieutenant Richardson. "She's done everything we asked," he said, nodding. "Shall we reinstate her to patrol?" Before anyone could answer, Wilson quietly raised her hand. "With respect, I'd like to request something else." The room stilled. "I don't want to return to patrol," she said, voice clear. "I want to join the new Community Relations Division, the one working with youth, with training, with repair." Chief Bennett blinked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "My badge gave me authority, but this journey taught me what earns trust, and trust is what I want to build." For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly people began to nod, even the civilians who once called for her firing. And Richardson, he just smiled. Because sometimes courage isn't returning to where you were. Sometimes it's choosing where you're meant to go next. 3 months later, a new sign gleamed above a freshly painted office door at Headquarters Community Safety and Relations Division. Inside, Wilson stood in front of a group of fresh-faced officers, some skeptical, some curious. She was no longer the officer with a badge and a beat. She was something different now, a bridge. "This program doesn't ask you to be perfect," she told them. "It asks you to pay attention to your reactions, your biases, your silence, because those things have power too. In the back of the room, Richardson watched, not as a superior, but as someone who'd once offered her a hard choice and now watched her honor it. One cadet raised their hand. Officer Wilson, do you really think people can change? Wilson paused, thinking of Darnell, of the grandmother in the circle of herself. Yes, she said, because I did, and I'm still changing. The room fell quiet, and in that moment they didn't see the woman from the headlines. They saw someone trying, failing, learning. And that was the real start of reform. One quiet afternoon, Wilson returned to the convenience store, not to stock shelves or lead a training, just to say thank you. Mr. Patel poured her tea without a word. My nephew's graduating next month, he said. He's thinking about studying criminal law. Wilson smiled. He's brave, he said. After everything, he wants to be the one who makes it safer, not scarier. She nodded, a lump in her throat. Can I speak to him? She asked. Not to explain, just to apologize. Mr. Patel looked at her, not as a former cop, not as a symbol of failure, but as a person. I think he's ready, he said. The meeting wasn't long. The young man was taller now, more assured. His eyes were no longer afraid, just guarded. I remember that day, he said. But I see you now, too. Wilson didn't ask for forgiveness, but he gave her something more powerful, a second chance, not in her career, but in someone's memory. And sometimes that's where healing begins. 6 months after it all began, Wilson stood outside headquarters, not to reclaim a job, but to walk into a purpose she had chosen. The building looked the same, but she wasn't. Her posture had softened. Her eyes held more than focus, they held reflection. Inside, the review board announced her official transfer to the Community Safety and Relations Division. As the meeting ended, Richardson pulled her aside. You surprised me, he said. I surprised myself. She smiled. Reporters waited outside. One approached with a microphone. Officer Wilson, how does it feel to be back? She looked into the camera, calm. It's not about getting my job back, she said. It's about doing the job differently for everyone. That evening, she drove home with her uniform folded beside her. She might wear it again. She might not. But for the first time, it didn't define her. Because true service wasn't about command. It was about connection. And that she was finally ready to protect. Prejudice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through silence, assumptions, and reflexes we never question. But when we dare to face it, not with defense, but with humility, we begin the real work of change. True justice isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, humanity, and the courage to do better, one choice at a time.